Stacie, you are so warmly welcome. It is fantastic to have you on board. Thank you for taking the time and being willing to share what you've been doing. So today is really about your story, about how you're taking this forward in your company. And I would first love if you can just give an introduction to who you are, what you work with, and a little bit around your company, if that might be okay.
Yeah, thank you, Rana. I'm so excited to be here. It was almost exactly a year ago when I reached out just before the pandemic started. I work at a company called Izotope. They're an audio software company here in Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they have hired me very newly into this role. They're going through a huge transformation themselves from a more traditional to an agile organization. And they were switching their business model from a perpetual business model to a subscriptions model. And then this is my first role, reporting into a CEO, kind of owning all the things people ops and HR. And so I realized that they were speaking this agile language that I didn't know a lot about. And they certainly, used it, and they were going full steam ahead. And I thought, well, if they're moving this fast and they have all of this complexity in their world and changing how they work, how they operate, what kind of products they deliver, HR needed to move just as quickly. And so I said, okay, well, if you're going to be HR agile, so are we. And so I reached out to Rana and the team and got very connected to her right away. She is a just immensely knowledgeable professional. I'm so excited to be here. Won't talk about the girl crush, but it exists. So excited. So fun fact, I'm from Kansas. You all me know where you're from. I grew up on a farm. My mom worked at a dairy. I often, was around animals and had a deep love and empathy for the experience of, anyone that came into my view. And so it was exciting to kind of move to Boston after college and not really know what I was going to do. But I met someone, said, hey, why don't you talk to my HR professional? She's really great at helping people find, the color of their parachute, or whatever we're going to call it. And she hired me into my first role in hospitality. And she grew up in the Ritz-Carlton world of surprise and delight your customer. And so everything from the beginning of my career has really been through the lens of the people experience and understanding others. And so that's how I got my start in HR. And then I worked for a large nonprofit shortly after the Haiti earthquake. And so joined an organization that really wants to deliver great value, but was full of bureaucracy and more traditional kind of top-down approach that delayed their ability to deliver help and disaster response. And so that was kind of life and death. And you start to realize how important being able to work fast and quickly and deliver value actually changes the game. And so then I joined tech. And that's really where I was like, oh, this moves fast. So you learn to be lean, you learn to be innovative. As an HR professional, you're kind of still working in these traditional modes, but everyone around you is moving really quickly. And so really, I think a lot of the work that we do is already agile. We just didn't have the framework and the knowledge and the language that Rana and the Agile HR community brings that allows you to really bring it to life and start moving as quickly as everyone else around you and in this really complex world that we're living in. So that's why I'm here today. That's my introduction.
And, awesome. I'm hearing that you've got, your background is really amazing. If we think about being lean, trying to get rid of process waste, as you said, with the Haiti nonprofit, and with the Ritz-Carlton background, I would like to actually talk about that more at some point, because that's a very exciting thing when you think about everything goes into delighting the customer, and people have the right and the accountability to do that. Even how can we create that kind of an experience for our employees? How can we delight our employees in every moment that matters throughout their career and experience? Awesome to have you here. Thank you for that introduction. Would you like to talk a couple of words about Izotope? So we get the context right. We're going to talk about Agile HR, but anytime we talk about Agile HR, we need to realize that that looks very different in different contexts.
Right.
So if you're a global, massive corporation with tens of thousands of people, that looks very different from a startup or from a growing company with some hundreds of people. So today we're working in a certain context when we're discussing this, and we'd love to hear about that context a bit.
Yes, sure. So we are a 200-person company, mostly headquartered and based, the gravity and momentum is in the US. And then we have about 15 employees in Berlin and Tokyo. And so we are global, but we have a centralized HR team, people ops team, and we have about 5 of us in crew with some specialties, but really working towards that everyone on the team becoming more of a generalist and being able to develop products across the employee experience. So we really are trying, even when we hire, we were looking for well-rounded, or if you're specialized, that's great. We're going to utilize you. But also, what are the other 2 or 3 things you want to do as a professional or a practitioner? And that's kind of how we frame the work that we do is T-shaped.
So it's T-shaped HR people. What about the growth rate, and what about what's going on the business side? So is it growing? Are you looking for talent that is difficult to find in the market? So you're competing with employee experience. What's going on there?
Yeah, we're looking to massively grow in revenue. We have recently partnered and joined forces with a much larger company in Berlin called Native Instruments, if you're aware. They're about 450 employees. So we were trying to harness kind of the collective power of their offerings and ours. And while we haven't completely merged yet, that may be something that happens, years down the line. We're trying to figure out all the collaboration points together. So we have the people. We're not looking to kind of double our team in terms of headcount or our company.
Yeah.
Really trying to find what are the places in between that is going to dramatically increase our revenue and ability to deliver to customers.
Great. So you're looking for basically more value creation with what you have. And I'm hearing kind of 3 things. Subscription model is a massive change in how the tech works, how the sales work, how you reach out to customers, how you serve and maintain what you have, and how you do customer service as well on the business side. The second thing, what I'm hearing is growing in revenue means that you need to make sure that you've got a sustainable, scalable business structure in behind, because you can't do more with that amount of people. You need to do work smarter, right?
Yep.
And then also the partnerships coming in. So that might need a lot of agile ways of working, collaboration, co-creation with a new partner to find out what works in here. And now let's get into what HR is doing. So very excited to go into. We have, of course, discussed with Stacie a little bit around this meetup, but we haven't prepared slide set or discussion points. We've got a couple of points that we want to start touching upon. And I would very much welcome you to ask questions as well. So if you have some questions, please pop those into the chat and I will pick them up while we are discussing. It might be that the question is a large one where we then ask Stacie to reply from her context. So what would that look like in Izotope? I might pop in with a couple of ideas about what that looks in other kind of contexts. So let's work that way to create this a bit more interactive, but to keep the pace all the time. So looking forward to getting your questions through the chat. All right, let's kick in. First of all, we talked about the mindset change that needs to start happening. So you started basically from scratch, taking the HR team towards this way of thinking. And can you share about what are your thoughts around that? Where did you start? What was going well? What would be your recommendations? Just talking around that a bit.
Yeah, I think it was somewhat easy. The company itself was talking about Agile and becoming a cross-functional organization. They'd already gone through some self-selection where people chose which teams and work streams and initiatives they wanted to work on in other parts of the business that were end-to-end. So from an idea to a delivery to a customer, they were able to consolidate and simplify small teams that were very entrepreneurial and able to deliver an experiment and try something out. And in HR, we're like, oh, we don't experiment. We get everything right the first time. We don't make any mistakes. And so I was coming in from a very traditional previous kind of HR administration and team, very much, we'll decide what the performance reviews look like. We'll decide who has access to what systems. And one of the first things I did was really think about, well, my cross-functional team is my operations team. And so how can we really quickly become this service model that is fast and delivers quality and challenges the assumptions from the past? So it was asking a lot of questions, like what kind of a learning agenda. We got our leads from the different teams or different professionals from IT and legal and finance. And we'd say, hey, is there a legal requirement for us to do an employee review every year? are employee reviews like actually valuable? Because we're spending a lot of time doing them, and so we just started having these conversations that were never really had before, never questioned. And now we're just kind
Love
of
it.
conversations. We allow, it was physical and it's logistical, but we allowed finance into our HRIS, right? There's no reason that FP&A and accounting and certain people that we should trust. And so it's really about building the trust, knocking down the silos, and starting these conversations from the beginning and starting small. Everything was moving fast around us. We wanted to keep up to kind of in that same, competitive, how are we going to stay relevant and valid in this organization?
Am I hearing that you started because this is what I very much like about this case, is that you started the conversations cross-functionally. You just didn't do that in HR and then tried to bring others along, but you actually started it with legal, with finance, with maybe facilities, whoever the leaders of these functions, is to start challenging how you are managing and supporting the company altogether.
Yeah,
that's pretty remarkable. What about the mindset change with the HR professionals? Because I'm hearing the language was already there. Many people who are on the call right now, you might have a structure where you don't have the language there. The businesses, maybe some pockets in your organization are working in an agile way, but most of the people don't know about this. Now you've got the brilliant platform where your people are truly self-organizing. They have the language, they understand the language, so you can basically quite kind of plug into their world when you start learning this in HR. But could you talk us through, without, of course, giving names or anything that, how was it for your HR team? Because quite many of us come from a traditional background, and we need to kind of rewire our thinking a bit.
That's right. Yeah, we did a lot of things. I think at first people on the team thought were a bit radical, opening up, being transparent. We first started with this, we didn't have like a real great intranet site or a way to communicate what was going on in the organization. We had Confluence, but it's pretty like much a repository of information, not anything that's engaging. And so we created our own Google site just to talk about, we rebranded as People Ops. So no longer HR, but we have this human-centered
Awesome.
focus. Yes. It seems silly, but it is powerful. And it invokes a different type of feeling and welcoming. And so we created this People Ops site that said, hey, this is who we are. These are our principles. And what we did is we took those agile principles that are in the manifesto that you may have heard about from the software world, and we recreated them for People Ops. So we'd say people over process, what does that mean for us? And so we kind of started with our principles, and we talked about, what do people say about us now? They say you're, hard to navigate, slow to respond, irrelevant. And then I said, how do you want people to talk about us in the future? What would be an ideal state when people say, oh yeah, People Ops, they're so collaborative, they're experimental, they're all these things perhaps. And so we went through some of these exercises, and I will say that not everybody came along. Some people said, you know what, I don't really think that this is me, or this is uncomfortable for me to feel this kind of ambiguity in what's next. And so, maybe about a year later, I'd say like half of our team had turned over. Somewhat proactively, it's kind of like, this is where you want to work, or this isn't. Yeah. And
but I'm hearing also that you made it safe for people to actually express that, to say, this is not how I want to do my profession, but then also very clearly moving towards that vision because your company is going that way. So taking your team towards this. Yeah,
exactly. And you saw that across the business too. That wasn't just HR. It was a lot of change really quickly. And some people, it wasn't where they were comfortable. So we started there. We started the People Ops, and we're like, let's be transparent about our diversity stats. And people are like, no, we can't.
Right.
Like, no, let's do it. This is what we're trying to be for the organization. And using those agile principles, we kept moving forward, building out that site to show more and more and more about what we are and what we're doing. And so that was really one of the early ways to think about the mindset and rebrand in a lot of ways for People Ops.
When you did this, I can guess that you were quite excited about the response from the organization. So can you share a little bit what the first responses were and have they changed or shifted since that? Is that now kind of a usual thing that people ops is like this and they're agile and they're responsive and blah, blah, blah? Or what was the response? Did you see
Yeah,
any
it was
impact?
It was an incredible response. If you think about the portfolio of things that we touch, they're deeply personal to people. Their compensation, you know, how do we make pay decisions, right? And the more we're like, can we be transparent about how we make pay decisions? Actually, maybe we can't, because maybe we don't have a good system for that. And so we'll start to talk to, you know, our employees or look at survey data and find trends and themes that people say, oh, you know, I don't know if I'm paid fairly to market, or I don't know if my manager is making good decisions about my value here, or I don't feel valued, might be one of the things you hear.
Yeah.
And so we start to kind of translate some of the work that we do. How can we improve that experience? How can we make someone feel valued? And so it was just opening up the doors and taking the blinders off to all the different intersections that we have to the employee experience, made people want to come to us and start talking about it. And so as soon as we put a poll out to say like, hey, tell us more about, you know, the review process that you go through from a manager lens, from an employee lens, talk to us about this. And we got talked to, right? People have a lot to say. It's very personal and important.
And isn't this remarkable? When you start trusting your employees and trusting your people, they want to impact and influence, and they want to help you do a good job because it's impacting their everyday lives. So I think this is something that we all should take in quite quickly, is that don't be too afraid to co-create with employees. Of course, there's a couple of tips that I would like to say is, first of all, what you, Stacie, said, try to be, you know, constrain what you're asking about, limit that to something clear, because if you're asking about everything, you will get requests from everything, and that makes expectation management a bit difficult, because what you are asking for is also creating expectations, right? So you have to be able to respond to what you're asking about. Yeah,
it's funny, we actually have this Ask People Ops Slack channel now, which was really meant to be a kind of a quick way to get a quick answer about anything related to people ops. And a year later, after kind of doing all of this co-creation with our employees, they'll go in there, they feel like they're an extension of people ops. So the channel's called Ask People Ops. The turnaround time is probably 0.05 seconds, because everyone's like, oh, I can answer that for you. And it's just this is amazing kind of open, you know, forum for people. And it makes our team, you know, releases capacity for us to go and do other more valuable things if we're not, you know, always the one everyone has to go to as a bottleneck.
I love that. Ask people ups, and it becomes actually ask the people around you, you know.
Yeah.
But here I see a big red flag, you know, the traditional HR is waving a red flag and saying, oh my God, what if somebody answers about something which is, you know, connected to legal or something that's connected to compliance, and they answer it wrong and somebody does make a mistake. So how would you talk about that?
Yeah, so we monitor, we look at the channel, and oftentimes the people will course correct. The crowd will come in and say, hey, actually, that's not the right answer. Or, hey, why don't you go talk to Stacie directly about this? Why don't you talk to general counsel about this? And the team will be there to say it. Or sometimes, you know, there's some like housekeeping you need to do. You're like, hey, everyone, love that you care so much to answer these questions and help us all out. But if you don't know the answer, if it's a guess, refrain from responding to the channel. And people kind of laugh and like, oh, okay, you got, like, that makes sense.
Exactly, great, awesome. And this, I love it in the context of 200 people, that people starting to own their culture and help each other out. Fantastic.
Yeah.
So what if we talked about moving towards agile ways of working? One of the very exciting things that you started doing is trying to stay on the pulse of the business. So keeping a kind of frequency of planning and agreeing on what you should deliver. Can you talk about how you moved towards that? First of all, how did you come up with that idea that you need to do a more frequent planning, and how you would like to do the planning? And then let's go into how that works.
Yeah, it just made sense. There's a lot of dependencies on all the things that are happening, especially if you're moving to a subscription model. There's revenue recognition, finance, there's, you know, license and privacy policies and legal things that are happening all around us. There are certainly like certain people policies. Everyone's now moving into these cross-functional teams. So now their managers they're not directing any of their work or not participating in their work, and is no longer able to kind of make that direct connection. And so it just seemed right that we would be a part of the quarterly planning with the rest of the product focused teams, and that we would be there to find our long pole that hit through their strategic. What are they trying to do? And so that became just kind of an obvious add-on, instead of them coming up to us and then we say, what are you working on? What is it that you're doing? Or, you know,
or even worse, saying, here is what we have created. Now we need to push this out to you.
yeah. Or you have engineers who say, no, I read the revenue recognition, accounting, legal code, and so I know what we're doing. And we're like, well, we don't want to be behind or be reactive or the last to know. And so that was part of it, is gathering the data in real time during quarterly planning only makes operations that much stronger.
And when you started working this way, what does it look like in practice? I mean, anybody can say, let's do quarterly planning and let's listen to the business. And does it mean that you're getting memos? Does it mean that you're in the meetings? Does it mean that you then go in and plan yourself? How does it look like? So where does it start? Do you have something that you want to talk about, and kind of, without giving too much information that you can't talk about, of course, about what does it in practice look like? I mean, a quarterly planning where, if I understand correctly, both you from a people perspective, a legal, finance is in, I'm not sure if marketing, sales are in there as well.
Yeah,
so
everybody's there. So all the leadership teams and any maybe principals that should be part of planning are part of planning. It's about 37 people. And we go in once a quarter. We use kind of virtual whiteboarding sessions in breakout rooms. And it's pretty well organized. We have an internal facilitator who manages the whole week for us. It's usually about 4 days. And we are our own ops leadership team. And we get to see all of the iterations in the planning in real time in a group session. And so there might be some, you know, go back to your team and think about how what you just heard is going to impact your quarter coming up, and where you might see some of the possible value drivers. And then we come back together and we talk about it, and we all present what we think is our thing, and we iterate, move things around, move things out. We talk about capacity and planning for, you know, if one group has a really big cycle of maybe the IT team is turning over 100% of their infrastructure, might be a low development quarter for IT for other things in the business, and they need to know that as well.
Correct. So what you're looking at is so awesome. I mean, I can see this in front of me. It's kind of scaling agile across the organization. You've got 37 people there, and what I hear is that you are planning this properly. You've got proper facilitation, who is only focusing on facilitating, and then the leaders can focus on this planning. And it takes 4 days, whereas you go in and iterate and discuss. And a couple of things what we usually work on quite a lot with executive teams is the dependency management and the capacity management. And you mentioned both of them.
Yes.
So dependencies, of course, can you talk a little bit more around what kind of dependencies might there be and how do you handle them? And I could just talk about that a bit more then. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I'm trying to think. So we have in operations with the recent M&A activity with Native Instruments, we want to find how can we build a platform for collaboration enablement across the two companies. And so one of our operational objectives was to create the NFR program, or being able to swap products. So Native can use Izotope products, Izotope can use Native products. And we're like, yeah, that's going to be something we're going to be able to deliver that's going to have a lot of value for our employees at the end of this quarter. And so we wrote our objective and our key result and how we were going to do that. And then when we presented it to the rest of the group, you have your information systems team. It's like, well, how are you going to, you know, handle the credit card and billing? Because we don't have like a free NFR.
Right.
You know, so that's one of the things that would come up, and you're like, oh yeah, we didn't think about that. Let's reframe what we think is actually deliverable by the end of the quarter. We might take the slice of, all right, let's just do one bulk NFR, toss it over, and we'll worry about automating that in the next quarter.
So here I'm hearing that you're looking at dependencies, and everybody understands their own team's capacity as well. So while we might have some dependencies to a certain team in a certain quarter, say that IT needs to work a lot on something in a quarter, the others can't ask IT to work on their stuff during that quarter because it's prioritized to work on the business part. Okay, I'm seeing, yeah. So how do you argue? How, you know, you need to be arguing about priorities sometimes, because what I'm seeing quite a lot happen is how could I explain this? The business value drivers are the ones that are highly prioritized. So if there's something important in business, we need to do that, which might end up in that we are forgetting about the enablers or architecture or something that needs to be done in the background, which isn't directly adding value to the end customer or the revenue streams or the profitability, but kind of builds the capabilities and builds the architecture to enable automation, to enable lean services, to enable doing more with less people. And we sometimes need to kind of take care of that architecture as well. And this I can see happen quite a lot in executive teams where the salespeople are, saying, we need to get this right now, we can sell this. And the people who are in the back end say, whoa, we don't have the capability to maintain that. So yeah. Do you see that argument going on?
Yes. So, I mean, we've been doing this now over a year with all lovely facilitation and iterations. And we are still trying to ask ourselves, how do we really plan for capacity? How do we not just go broke at the end of every quarter and pretend we're starting new without any other maintaining or other capacities to support what we built the last few quarters?
Right, exactly.
And so I think it's about this quarter, this next quarter, and next planning is going to be the focus will be about how do we do capacity planning better? I think it's always the question. We certainly don't have the answer, but being aware that that's what's going to drive burnout. That's what's going to be, people overcommitting and underestimating what's possible in any one quarter. And HR is so used to saying yes. Like, to bring it back to HR, like I do not have a great reflex for saying, so if we're going to do this, then we're not going to do that. I work on that every day, because otherwise I'll say yes to all the things, not because I can't say no, but because you see as an HR person how everything is connected.
And everything's so important. Exactly. Yeah. You want to deliver value, you want to do it all. This is one thing that I also see with HR teams is, we just have a certain capacity. Think about this. Agile is very simple. If you think about capacity management, you've got X amount of people, they've got X amount of hours. First, you remove all that maintaining business as usual, what needs to be just keeping the lights on. How much does that take? Well, 25, 30% maybe of everyone. And then you've got 70% of that time to use for something. Now, of course, what you use that for and how efficient you are in delivering with that 70% is what we're looking at when we're prioritizing work with capacity, etc. How does that look like when you then you have these quarterly sessions? It takes you some days to do that. You come out of that with a plan, a quarterly plan for your HR team, right? Or people team.
Yeah.
What happens then? How do you then iterate and discuss, and what happens with that?
Yeah, well, it is my job as kind of like the product owner and the key stakeholder of the people ops team to make sure we're not overcommitting. So you have a sense of that going in. And then when you do bring back kind of that big rock that came out of the quarterly planning, and you dump it on everyone's heads and you're like, this is what we got to do this quarter. We look at Trello as a way that it's a Kanban, kind of virtual Kanban board. And we assign people the work that they're doing. Sometimes it's BAU work, and we mark it if it's big enough to be marked. If it is taking a significant amount of your time that week, we put it on our Kanban board. And so when I look at the dashboard view, I can see that my L&D, the person who's going to be maybe driving this management training that we want to do for Agile coaching, this person from my dashboard view is already at full capacity. And so that's when I come back to the HR team and I say, all right, Jack, not using names, but how are we going to deprioritize some of this other maybe less value stuff and add in a slice of this new work? And it may be, hopefully I don't overcommit to something in the quarterly planning. And there is a time for iteration. So if I come back and I did overcommit, what's beautiful about Agile organizations is that you can be wrong and you're almost given more permission to be wrong. And it's a place where you can say, you know what, this is too much for the team. We didn't think about this other maintenance work that we're doing.
Exactly.
And you come back and it's your job to say no. Otherwise, your team and you are going to get burnt out.
And I think what you're saying there is as well, you've started this way of working, a year ago maybe, or less. Of course, you're learning to better evaluate your capacity and also better estimate what the big rocks that you bring in are really about. So in Agile, we talk about estimating the workload. There are different techniques of doing that. And we're talking about also estimating the capacity and understanding what the capacity is in the teams. So you're becoming better at that all the time. Can you see that that happening throughout your team? And
Oh, for
you know
sure.
how, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say we're great at it by any means. We do tend to overcommit. The thing that we started is really simple is we'll say, hey, you have 10 points, 10 abstract points this week. Do you feel like you're at 8 right now? Do you feel like you're at 5? Do you feel like you're at 11? And they'll say, I'm at 11. And then we dig in and we look at where the problem areas are. And we either slice a slice and we deliver something that is only a piece of that. Maybe it's, instead of doing a 360s and goal setting this quarter, we're just going to do 360s. We can do goal setting. 360s will help inform the goal setting next quarter. Let's just find that slice of a slice. And it's kind of it's hard to estimate.
Yeah, and sometimes you have to do this. This is called what product owners say called feature slashing. So if you realize that you're not going to make what the promise, you're not going to build the full product in the timeline that we have discussed, we might need to do some feature slashing. And that's what you're describing there, to think about, okay, what are the slices that we can deliver? What can we leave out with maybe good intentions of really delivering the value anyway, but leaving out something.
Yeah.
So,
we have the feature mining process. If you want to,
yes, awesome.
Absolutely. That, I can kind of share
Talk us through that. Yeah.
So this is an exercise that we use when I talk about finding the slice, and this is important because we could do all the things. And so what we love about feature mining, and this is from Humanizing Work, Peter Green, who helped Adobe many years ago move to their subscription model. This is where we really start to empathize with and keep sight of the value we want to bring to our end user, to the employee at the end of the day. And so this can be done by our team. It can be done by a cross kind of segment of people, just to make sure that we have the true understanding of what the end user, if you will, is going to want from us. And so what we look at first is the impact and the value. And we talk a lot about like the value in the sense of like a psychological value or a financial and kind of well-being value that we're going to deliver as an HR team or people ops team at the end of this sprint, at the end of this quarter, et cetera. And so we often use these user story templates, which is kind of like, as an employee, I want to know that I'm paid fairly. Or as a manager, I want to make sure I help my team through organizational change. And so instead of, hey, build a continuous feedback program or build a manager development coaching program, we find the one thing that we know is going to deliver value fast and quick. And so this one here would be as a standout. As a manager, I can help my team better align to adapt to organizational change.
Awesome. So you're turning it into what you're delivering from a user perspective with a user story or your kind of internal customer, so to say.
Yeah. And it's really about empathizing first, and not about all the work or tasks you have to do to get there. But
correct. Yeah.
And so then we talk about, well, what's the bigness? What's big about that? And we're like, oh, we might not have the budget to do that. We might not, the managers are busy and they might not want to do this training. It might be kind of a risk. We put it together and no one participates. What are the uncertainties? And we kind of talk through all the possible constraints. And then the last section on the far right is really the most brilliant part, which is we say, well, what if we just, dot. And so that's where we find this slice. Well, what if we just avoid the bigness somehow? How can we avoid the risks and the uncertainties and still deliver something that's going to matter? And so that's where the good stuff happens, in my opinion, when you're breaking something down that's really complex and with humans and driving human behavior. And so what we say is, so we'll experiment and validate with our customers. And that's actually the wrong example at the end there, but it kind of like, we talk about scrappy, not crappy, but we might say, okay, well, let's just put managers through, let's poll managers and let's see if, we can understand what is it about organizational change or agile management that they're looking for. And let's pick one. So here we polled the managers and we said, what are the agile management practices you need the most to succeed in your role? And we see it's setting expectations with the team members, and group decision-making are the top two areas. that managers feel that they need, they don't have it right now. The system doesn't provide this for them today. How can we as a people ops team provide that for them? So we get together with Peter Green, we put together a really quick 2-day interactive training session for managers about setting expectations and group decision making. And we had 100% of our managers participate in that, come back with amazing feedback, say, I'm using this stuff today. This was incredible. Thank you so much. So that's like a really great way that we find our slice after probing and sensing what it is that we can really deliver.
I love what you're saying here and how you are converging into the most valuable pieces, and then not even believing that you know them as HR professionals or people professionals, but you are actually asking the people to co-create what is the most important with you. You've identified some stuff that might be relevant, but
Right.
now let's have the people who are targets of our services to choose the services themselves. And as you can see, what you mentioned, 100% of people joined because it was relevant and valuable for them. If we had put them through something else, well, they are all quite relevant here, but if we might have had something which is less of a relevant and did not ask them and created modules where they need to go through all of them, you wouldn't have seen 100% of participation there for sure.
Yeah, and there's different ways to slice it too. So not only does this create kind of a nice backlog for you too, because maybe you don't do all the things all at once, but maybe you slice it a different way. Maybe you take 1 or 2 critical leaders, put them through an end-to-end program before you build it out for everybody. And the slice is now A to Z. You're getting them through the whole program. Then you get feedback, then you iterate, and you scale it out to the rest of the organization when you know it's something that's going to be really, really valuable.
Correct. What do you think about this? Because quite often HR people professionals, and we work with organizational development, we want everything to be perfect. We are over delivering and we are describing our projects with every possible detail and every possible perspective and the exceptions of exceptions of exceptions, and also then the conversations about including everybody, the inclusion and diversity and inclusion perspective, where I have currently a couple of clients who get lost in the conversation because they include everything into the deliverable. What would you say as a tip for the people, to give them the confidence of starting some feature slashing and trying delivering smaller bits and pieces to the organization rather than always thinking about the big thing? What are your thoughts around what would be your tips to your colleagues here?
Yes, so I think when something is complex, when you're talking about changing someone's behavior, or you want to do something with humans in which you have many, many different elements that go into the thing, that's when you should start a feature mining process. What is it that what is the value you always want to stay on top of? What are we really trying to deliver, and not rely on your old traditional methods? And so that's kind of like the design thinking principles, and really trying to understand your customer first.
Yeah.
And then it's the secret sauce is finding your slice. It might be you start with an experiment that you think, a hypothesis. You're like, if we do this, if we remove bonuses from a variable bonus from compensation and roll it into their salary, we think we'll get better, less distracted.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't now worry whether or not they're going to get their bonus. They're focused on delivering value to their end customers. And so you say, well, that's a huge program to change. That's huge. Well, what if we did it with just our key account managers in EMEA? What if we just did it in engineering? And you start to get feedback, iterate, and deliver some data-backed evidence that your experiment worked. Or if it didn't work, what can you build on that did? And so I think you can do that as a team of one. You can do that as a large HR team.
Yeah.
A slice that feels like it's small enough that it's achievable and accessible, and that you can build on it.
So these are the techniques that we also train for our customers in our programs, so design thinking and throughout the certified practitioner program. And what people tend to like about this, that it's not even difficult to understand. I mean, super easy and simple to understand. It just takes effort and it takes discipline to do it gracefully. So would you talk about that discipline and that you tend to build this in your way of working. It's nothing extra that you two do on the side, but it's actually a way of working and thinking in your everyday people work. Oh, is that a perspective that you're thinking about?
Yeah.
It's not like, okay, let's do it normally now and let's do something with design thinking here, but you're actually bringing that into everything you do, if I understand it correctly.
I mean, not always. I think we're kind of a hybrid. We certainly still have some traditional aspects of our work and people ops. I wouldn't say we're fully agile at all. There's certain things like open enrollment. Maybe there's something in there that we can think about delivering a better value, and we'll find something that feels a little bit more strategic. You can find that in payroll. You can find it in, visas and immigration work. You can innovate anywhere, and we truly believe that. So we'll always be looking for it. Where's that little magic we can experiment with? We love to call them experiments. It gives you permission to fail. People go, oh, that's a pilot. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And there is less pressure to do it perfect when you use that type of language and you use the scientific method and data-backed kind of ways of working. It works, but sometimes it's just like, get open enrollment done and like survive.
Just get that done and then decide how it's done, and it needs to be done quickly. But that's also a decision you make explicitly, right? So, okay, we need to get this done. Do we have the time to co-create and innovate and onboard everybody and get design sprint done? Or is this kind of a simple thing that we can just decide on how this is done and harmonize it across the organization?
Yeah, right. I think one of our mistakes, especially on the operations team, because we were surrounded by really end-to-end delivery work streams. And so we wanted to create this end product that ops owned and built together and delivered. And we failed a bunch of times. We're functional expertise. And it is really hard to say, oh, I'm going to help build something in the people ops, or I don't build anything for our general counsel, right? So we considered our operations team it's very lightweight agile. We definitely try to find the long pull through and have a shared OKR for the quarter that helps deliver value to the business. But we don't try to like build a skateboard that crosses all the things operations, but we very much value and benefit getting together as a collaborative team that understands our capacities and dependencies for the work that is in our vertical. And it's the most high functioning operations team I've ever seen and worked with. We meet 3 times a week. We have a planning session and 2 stand-ups where we talk about emerging work and then progress on our OKRs for that quarter.
Let me just write that down. Can you please take down the slide so we can see you better? Thank you. So I've got a couple of things here. First of all, you said that you're using OKRs, objectives and key results, for each quarter. So it's very clearly defined what you're aiming to do. The vision is clear, what you're impacting is clear, and you've got some metrics as well, what you're trying to see that they are there after the quarter. How do you follow up? Because sometimes we do the mistake of just working, moving on to the next part, not really reflecting on what's been done. And is that a good, are we really done? Is that increasing the input that we wanted or having the impact that we wanted? So how do you review?
Well, we review in our planning sessions. We might skip a couple planning sessions. We're not really talking about measuring the KRs yet or understanding if we're on track or behind. Oftentimes with ops, especially during a pandemic and all the change, we get sucked into the minutia.
Just get it done. Yeah,
we do. And we have to say, all right, let's pull this back. And we do a retrospective. Like, we spent way too much time talking about our return to office and not enough time talking about our shared OKR around GDPR, for example. So we do our retros and we try to understand where we fell like short of what our standard was. We also meet with our executive leadership team twice a month.
Oh, wow.
So that gets us to score and understand how are we going to be transparent about where we are in those OKRs. So it certainly helps when you have an agile management and leadership team all around you, because they're the ones driving you and you can't help but really try to keep up.
Awesome. Another thing which I think was important words here were that you were speaking about emerging work. So when we talk about portfolio management, when we talk about prioritizing, slashing features, weighing capacity with the effort coming in, we need to understand other work that exists in the backlog as well. So emerging work is something we don't know about, but we might start having some metrics, some gut feeling about how much work is coming in each month, which are surprises. And that is something that you said you also talk about in your weekly meetings. How does that look like?
Yes, so we have a dedicated stand-up on Wednesday mornings, kind of middle of the week, to talk about only emerging work.
Ah,
Yeah, so we know we are very much aware of it, and we don't pretend it doesn't happen. We did an exercise shortly after we all went virtual, where we created this calendar app that we all felt like there was a lot of meetings and more meetings, and we were all fatigued by that. And we still were committing to new, commits on our roadmap, even though we felt like we were drowning. And so we simply did a calendar assessment analysis, and we saw that we were actually spending 60 plus hours in meetings every week.
oof.
So we realized, really quickly that emerging work was, and the underestimation of our time.
Yes.
And it took looking at something to say, oh, wow, I spent 80 hours in meetings this week. No wonder I didn't make progress on any of these other things. So you're really just trying to find tools and ways to bring to light what is happening around you so that you can properly commit and estimate any emerging work you might want to take on, or what is it that you need to stop doing, which is
I'm so glad to hear this. I mean, what I'm hearing you say over and over again is when you're faced with, okay, there's emerging work coming in, you've got a feeling that you're not making progress enough, etc. What you started doing is looking for evidence. Okay, let's look at how many hours goes into, sudden meetings. Oh, 60 hours, no wonder. So that's another example of Agile HR for sure, or Agile methodologies and thinking is, let's not make decisions of our way of working without evidence. And you're looking for evidence to help you guide, okay, what's our next step? And I think that's so beautiful. Awesome. Would there be something that you would like to we are tight on time, but would you like to wrap up with, I mean, time flies when you're having fun. Would you like to wrap up with some kind of tips and tricks? Where could people start with this? So, I mean, you've now worked this way for a year. You started somewhere. What could be your tips where people can start doing this if they're not working maybe in a fully agile mode or don't have an agile organization?
I think everyone has access to their employees, whether that's through surveys or the relationships that they've built in the organization. That's what HR is good at, is they have a lot of data at their fingertips. So find one or two things that might not be delivering a lot of value, or you've seen it year over year over year that people are not appreciating this particular part of the experience. And then think through, like a scientist, like, well, what if we did something else? What is it that the employees want in this particular area? And it could be anything. It could be onboarding. It could be benefits. It could be your compensation. That's a tough one. There's a million places really that you could start. And if you have an engineering squad, I would start there. I've stolen so much of what I know, not only Rana, but from the engineering crowd, so they're happy to do an experiment with you. And that's what they do and solve complex problems all the time to deliver value. So they're going to be having a nice ripe audience, I think, with
and they're also a good critical bunch of people who can give you very good constructive feedback when you need that. Awesome.
Yeah, that's why it's that rewarding when they say, this was amazing. I loved my continuous feedback review this year. Like, you did? Like, it feels really great that we're not now trying to push things onto people, but they're actually coming to us to say, hey, I heard marketing has an amazing XYZ that pilot that you ran. Build that for us.
Can we have that as well? Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It comes back to the Ritz-Carlton kind of fantastic segue back to delighting our employees and creating awesome experiences for them. Think about this. If we in HR or people operations could hear our employees say what you just said, they've got an amazing feedback structure and we want to use that as well. They're pulling our processes and practices and products to them. That's what we want to create. So
this is a great framework to be able to prioritize the most important value you can in the quickest way that you can get it into someone's hands, like a demo, a real thing that someone can hold. An experience is fantastic. So yeah, it is brilliant. It's hard to, it's easy when you have all the data to say, oh, we have to do all the things.
Exactly.
And so it's this agile framework that allows me to say, we're going to do these things first. These are the most important. Here's how we're going to do it. And it's driven by our employees. It's co-created with them. When we deliver it, it's going to be utilized. People are going to be more engaged with it, and we're going to drive better results. And they go, oh, okay. You know, it's like it's
is that
something that HR never has.
The final thing that we have no questions in the chat, so I'm just going to continue asking. Will this help you have proper conversations with your executives as well, where they understand, you know, you can show them, these are the things that we delivered during the last quarter. So you can show deliveries and value to them. This is what we're going to prioritize the next quarter. And no, we're not going to do what you're asking to do because of X, Y, and Z. So you can actually have those prioritization conversations without getting bogged down by HR isn't delivering or HR is bureaucratic or whatever. So talk us through that a little bit.
Yeah, you might say, yes, we will do that. And we're going to start with our go-to-marketing team. And in fact, we're going to start with, from the last Pulse survey, the most low-rated, unhappy team. And we're going to try to do something that's going to make a difference and move the needle there. And they're like, and usually they're like, oh, okay, you get it. You're going to do something and it's going to work.
Right.
And it's going to be fast and you're going to have validated that story. And then you're going to scale it. Beautiful. Most executives appreciate that better than saying, sure, we'll do that. And you go back to your team and you say, all right, how do we do all these things?
Yeah, and we'll deliver that in 2 years. So you have to wait for 2 years for something to come out, right? Awesome. So thank you so much for helping us, Stacie. I think that if we are going to wrap up today, I am thrilled to hear what you're doing. I can see, you know, if I would assess your agile maturity there, with ticking all the boxes there, starting from the customer experience and employee experience, working through prioritization, delivering value, slicing those features, making sure that people are using whatever you're delivering, and also saying no. So a lot of these massive, these kind of ways of working, practices coming together in your context. And I appreciate so much that you've been here to sharing. Will for sure, as we can see in the chat as well, people are appreciating it very much. So thank you so much for being here. Anything that you want to say to the community before we wrap up?
Oh, no, I mean, I am so appreciate you in the Agile HR community. It's so exciting. I've never felt more opportunity in the field of HR and people ops. And I think what you're doing is fantastic. So I hope to see everybody around the community.
I hope to see you as well. And I hope that we can set up some kind of conference to actually meet each other live. That would be lovely to have an Agile HR, even an unconference where we can share stuff and in a warm place, please, not in Finland, where I am from. Thank you, Stacie, for being online. Thank you, everyone, for taking out the time to be with us today. Have a fantastic, fantastic day, evening. See you hopefully soon. Thank you.